we'll go ahead and start anyway. And is there anybody who would like to volunteer a prayer and invite the Spirit today?
I can say it.
Thank you, Gracie.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we're so grateful that we get to gather as a class today and learn about ancient Rome. Please help us to have the Spirit with us and be able to understand and retain the things that we're learning. Help us to be able to pick out principles and then be able to apply them in our lives. Thank you for our teachers and the time they put into preparing lessons, and help us to be able to participate freely. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I really hope you will participate freely, all of you, because we're going to talk about some controversial things today. And I don't know all the answers. I have some opinions, but I hope you have your opinions too. I want to welcome Dallin Tibbetts to this class. He's joining us this second semester, so he doesn't have all the knowledge that you have behind you in the ancient Rome. However, all of you kind of jumped in, not knowing all the things that the older students have known in the past either. So it's not like you have to have a foundational knowledge of Rome to continue on with what we're learning now. Everybody will, if they go through the 4-year rotation, you get all of that. And besides, you're going to grow up learning more and adding to your knowledge anyway. So we welcome Dallin, and we still don't have everybody here. We should have about, I think there's 13 students. So hopefully they'll come in. I know Naomi is moving to Florida, and I think this might be the week she's moving from, was it Kansas? I think it was Kansas. Now she's moving to Florida, so she may not even be available to get on, but she'll watch the recording. Okay, thank you, Gracie, for that. I really, really, really enjoyed reading the full written essays. Written, what's it called? Written exams. And I noticed that, let me get to the class notes, 65% of you, that's a big chunk of people, said that you were hindered by participating. No, you were hindered from, I've got that wrong, from participating because you were afraid of what people might think of you. So, or think of what you say or whatever. It was kind of written differently for all of you, but you were pretty much hindered from participating because you were afraid of what people might think of you. Okay, really quickly, I wanted to show, let me get to, we get to go over just a few things because we're going to help the new students figure out how to get onto the class notes. So go to your Humanities right now, then go to classwork, and then under semester prep. Now this is going to look a little different to you than for yours because mine is the teacher view. Whoa, did I just open that up? Oh, that's weird. That is really weird. I don't know what happened here. Okay. That is really weird. Okay, so classwork. And then if you go down to class information, there's class notes right here, and just click on that and you will get right to where we are now. I'm going to put Gracie down, if I can spell it right. Oh, good. We've got a lot of people here, so that's great. So 65% of you were afraid of what people might think of you. And my question to you is, what will people think of you if you don't participate? Right? So really, participation is a hard thing because you're having to articulate some things that maybe you don't have clear in your mind I'm going to stop sharing there. Um, Sometimes some of us have to feel like we have it really clear in our mind before we articulate. Some of us feel like we can't articulate well unless we open our mouth and let it all bubble out. And sometimes that means we're going around the bush until we finally get straight on to the point. But what's interesting is when that person is bubbling all around, let's say Jacoby goes, whoa, wow, that just made me remember something that happened last night. And maybe it's not really what the person is really trying to get at, but it really opened Jacoby's mind at that moment. Or Carter is thinking, whoa, what you just said was what my dad just said yesterday, something like that. And it starts to get people's minds just going. And pretty soon they're thinking of things and they're wanting to share them, but they don't want to share them because what if it's dumb and I don't want to say it? Well, I have to say, I want to make this place a very safe place. And I know you've seen me like pound on Elijah before, and you think, oh, I don't want her to pound on me, but I can do it with Elijah because he really wants it, don't you, Elijah? I just want you to know that this is a safe place and that everybody needs you to say something and that you all have something amazing to share. So with that behind us, and another couple things, when you're creating your documents to hand in your assignments, please, please, please copy the whole assignment and put it on your document, because that helps me remember what question you are answering rather than me having to go back to the assignment to see what the question was. Because sometimes if you don't have that question there, I have to go back and it takes a little bit of time. Also, when you answer, and Carter, kudos to you, my dear, my friend, change the color of your answers. So my words are black, right? So you've copied those words down, they're black. So you can choose whatever color of your choice that you want to answer your answers in a different color. It just is so helpful because sometimes I'll be reading along and I'll be going, this sounds really familiar. And then I'll realize, oh, that was my question that I asked. So rather than having to waste my time, because I'm having to look at 14 different assignments every week, although I should be honest, Jolene helps me. But it would help us, Jolene, right? If their answers were in a different color. So will you do that? Thank you. And copy all the assignment down and then answer in a different color. One more thing, when you do your questions, and by the way, Dallin, you don't have to know what all of those are right now, but you kind of do from the leadership class. But we're asking everybody in almost every assignment to write down the 5 types of questions. And I can spend some time with you after class or anytime this week, and we can go over that and learn that. But anyway, as you put your questions down, please, please, please put them in order of knowledge, meaning, principal question, interdisciplinary, and application. That way I can know, okay, this first one's going to be what is agency? A knowledge question, right? And usually a knowledge question is a pretty short question because you're not trying to get a ton of meaning out of it. You're just trying to get a straightforward answer, okay? Please do that in order. And if you don't want to and you want to rebel, fine. Do them in a different order, but at least label them. Okay, I'd rather you do them in order because if you're ever going to be a parent, which I think most of you will be, or if you're going to be married, or if you want to really manipulate your parents. No, wait, did I say that? Oh, wait a minute. Whew, forget that. You're going to want to start with a knowledge question first, and then you're going to want to ask a meaning question. And then you want to go into looking for the principle. And then you want to kind of expand your mind. You want to go into different works and that you're reading or that you're learning about. And let's say somebody's reading about, what books are you reading? Name one from a different class. Just name one.
Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Uncle Tom's Cabin. Okay. So here you want to expand and you want to ask an interdisciplinary question. How is Nero like Legree in Uncle Tom's Cabin? That's an interdisciplinary question because it's getting you into a different work of art, right? Or, okay, no, I'm not going to do the or. And then you say, okay, let's go into an application question. How do we apply everything that we just now learned through this knowledge and meaning and principle and interdisciplinary? Let's apply it now. How do we apply it? And the reason why we're learning these 5 types of questions is not because you want to get a good grade in this class. It's because you are building you. You're building yourself. Does anybody feel that? Do you feel like you're being built because you're writing these questions? A few of you. Some of you are going, oh, I feel like it's tearing me down. Okay. You can see it that way if you want, but really it's really building you to be this amazing character that can converse with anybody. How many of you feel uncomfortable conversing with people, certain people? Does anybody feel uncomfortable? I'm not talking about feeling comfortable with your friends. Okay, some of you, really only some of you, seriously? Okay. Okay, there's more of you. All right. Asking the right questions, you will begin to feel comfortable because you're asking them questions and they're talking. And then it inspires you to ask more questions. And then pretty soon, you're having this amazing conversation because you're asking questions for people to answer. And then you don't have to do a lot of the talking. You can actually do a lot of the learning from them. Does that make sense? It's pretty awesome. My computer's going to die. All right. Now, the more of a price you pay in studying, the more education you're going to possess. The more price you pay in writing those questions, the more education you're going to possess. And really, that's the only thing you can take to heaven. It's the only thing. You know, we see these emperors amassing all these treasures. They can't take that to heaven. One question I have on here, and I don't think I want to take the time today to do it, but we need to discuss it. A lot of you in your written final did not really know what fate was, and we kind of have to know that for ancient Rome. So your assignment is to think about what fate is for the rest of this semester, and we're gonna delve into it. I think we'll go into this, but I really want to go into some of your questions. By the way, and I didn't have this up, so it's not your fault. I have this. Wait, it's not showing, is it? Hold on. There it is. Okay, I should have had this up. Waiting. Could everybody choose one question from your assignment and write it below, and we'll go over those. And if you have not turned in your assignments yet, which I think 4 or 5 of you have not, would you please come up with a question from something that you read in this book? So in this reading. And let's give you maybe 2 to 3 minutes to do that. I'll go ahead and stop sharing. Okay. Carter, in your picture, you're planting a peach tree, it looks like. Is that right?
No, I'm hugging a bush.
Oh, you're not planting a tree? That's more amazing. Just kidding.
Yeah,
Tell me why you were hugging a bush.
it was a photo scavenger hunt at my friend's house, and one of them was hug a tree, and I couldn't find any trees, so I found a bush.
Oh, well, it's a baby tree. Okay, I'll be quiet now and let you all work. Let's go one more minute. I got to stand up and jump or do something. So just a sec. I went to the chiropractor this morning and I did something to my knee. I just got to get up off of it and do high knees or something. Okay. Great. These are great. Those of you who have not done questions still, put them up, but let's start. Thank you, Elijah, for putting your name near your question. I'm going to let the rest of you put your names so I can see. So everybody's wondering why I put this background up these days. My husband's home from work a lot, so he walks in and out, and this is my bedroom. So we've decided we're going to be a little more private here. Okay. Oh, Andrew, good. You're putting your name in your number one. You are awesome. You chose the number one spot. Okay, Andrew, let's go with yours. Could you ask it? And then I'm going to give you this semester, we're going to focus a little bit more on letting you moderate the discussion, and I'm just going to be silent. Okay. It's hard for me to be silent, but I'm going to try. So you'll notice, you'll call on people, you'll listen, and maybe you'll want to say, is there anybody else who has some thoughts about it? And then after everybody else has thoughts, then maybe you could add your thoughts to it, and then you can say, thank you, to let us know that you're done. And then we'll go to the next one. Okay, does that sound okay?
Yeah.
All right, go for it.
All right. So my question was, how can the principle of complying with the laws of God and our rulers apply to your life? So in other words, how do we find that balance of obeying our rulers, but still obeying the laws of God? Yeah, Carter?
I think that if the laws of the rulers are just and they're good laws, they'll go hand in hand with the laws of God. So it won't be hard to be able to keep the balance if you have a just leader. If there isn't the leader who's doing the right thing, then there may be issues trying to keep it balanced. But I think that there's not, if the leaders are doing the right things, there's not going to be a big gap between the two, so it shouldn't be hard to keep them up.
Would anyone else like to share their thoughts?
Yeah, I can go. So I actually had pretty much the same question you did. And I think it's a really hard question to answer because, like what Carter kind of said, it's really easy to follow, both of the laws at the same time if they're generally in the same, I guess, direction. But I mean, where most of the struggle comes from is when your leaders are completely, different or strange from the laws of God. Um, I don't really know if I have an answer to this one yet, so I'm just going to play around with some ideas. I think, like we saw in, or we read in the hiding place, I think that it can be a little bit different depending on who you are. Um, I think it was Betsy. I think um, she created her own, I guess, promise to herself that she would never lie, and that's one of the things that we're told from the scriptures and from God to never lie. Um, so she never lied, and I guess it worked out pretty well for her in the end. Whereas Corey, on the other hand, she kind of took that with a grain of salt and applied it to where she was living in a Nazi camp. So I think sometimes there is a divide where we have to take a stand for what we believe, even if that's against the leaders, even if as we read in the book or whatever, that we might be punished from it for it. Um, yeah, I really don't know what to say. I think it's more of a case by case thing than a general answer, which is why it's really difficult to answer it. But those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. It depends on your situation. We can just, yeah, follow the spirit and do what the situation directs. Sorry, did you have your hand up, Enoch?
I did, but you basically said it. Like, as long as we go with God, like Daniel, even when prayers were outlawed, he still prayed. And sometimes, even if they are outlawed, that you will die, you still pray in your heart, as the people of Ammon did. No, not Ammon, Alma did.
Thanks for answering that, guys.
That was fantastic, Andrew. Thank you, all of you who participated in that. I hope we can continue going through that even when Elijah brings up his question. And I think there's more that are talking about the same thing, because this is pretty interesting that we got from this author in 1975 when he was writing this. Okay, Emma, go for it.
Okay, so my question was, what does it mean to have itching ears? And for those of you who don't know what that's referring to, in the reading, let's see, it was in the second page of it was talking about the three bishops. And I was wondering what they meant, because it kind of said in the reading, it said having itching ears describes the false teachers, but I didn't know if there was like more behind it than I was seeing. So if anybody could help clarify that, that'd be great.
What page was it on?
It was the second page of the second reading about the three bishops.
Okay.
Second paragraph towards the bottom. right after it talked about, after it said the itching ears describes the false teachers, a couple lines later it says Christian believers will have fickle ears for new teachers that please them. So I don't know if that would help answering that question or not, but from the sounds of it, I don't know, like any new teacher or somebody who would have a different perspective about the gospel, I guess, please them. And I don't know if that's because they looked at things differently, so then they didn't have to, like, like before Joseph Smith, how like all the different churches looked at like the commandments differently or whatever, and saying that you have to do this, but you don't have to do that. But everybody was different. So I'm wondering if that's what that line means by new teachers please them or not, if that makes sense. Enoch?
I think it means is that the people, because it says the time will come that they will not endure sound doctrine. And so I think what it was kind of like Mars Hill, where Paul came and taught them, and they were interested to learn of something new. But as soon as it became old, they no longer wanted to listen to it. And so the itching ears they're itching for something new and keep going on to the new and new. And so they forget the old and what is important.
Thank you. Carter, do you have something to say?
Yeah, what I got from the itching ears, my understanding of what I learned from my reading, whatever, it seemed to me that the itching ear was they go around and hear the different things and then choose the one that suited them most. And if something came that suited them better, they'd choose that instead. And so they were choosing teachers who played the gospel to their benefit and stuff like that. So they weren't receiving the full truth. They were receiving parts of the truth being left out, and they were choosing to leave those parts out by not hearing them and stuff.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Elijah?
I was just looking through the translation, and it looks like this phrase comes from the Lucian phrase to tickle the ears, which is kind of just what everyone's just saying. I was just looking for the root. Just kind of boils down to like will heap themselves to a word, implying the indiscriminate multiplication of teachers, which is basically what just I mean having this preferred education where you're maybe even in an echo chamber where you're only accepting information that you already agree with, and so it's just basically confirmation bias, and you're not really listening fully. You have your own kind of spin on whatever information you come into contact with.
Thank you. I guess that's all.
Fabulous. Okay, good. I may want to have you guys take maybe just 3 minutes so we can get through all of these. Oh, you found it. Where was it? We lost our phones and my husband's been looking for it for 30 minutes. Thank you, Dave. Okay, let's go with Elijah next. Elijah, why don't you take it until 10:35?
Okay, so I had a very similar question to Andrew, and that was, where's the line between what members of the church should tolerate in governments and societies, and how should I decide where and what I influence? So this was very similar to the last question, and it was basically boiling down to, I think most of us agree at some point we should follow leaders, and we also agree at some point that we should always follow God. And so that we kind of understand that there's this balance here. And my main question is like, what's that distinction between where we're kind of compliant, I guess, to leaders, and where we have more of this like righteous anger that we see in like Matthew, I think 21, which is kind of the chapter right before we read the passage where he turns over the tables in the temple. And so like, where's that distinction between we see evil in the world? Where should we, I mean, I guess, allow it, I guess, and state to ourselves to remain peaceful? And where should we go out with this righteous anger to fight for what we believe in? Enoch.
So I was just thinking of it, and on the subject of masks, if a business asks me to wear a mask, I'll wear a mask. But if I'm going over to a friend's house and the governor says wear a mask, I'm not going to unless the person wants me to. And it's still a muddy situation, but that's my personal opinion.
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit lost here. Was that
All
like a
right, so
metaphor?
no,
Or,
like this is, I think my personal opinion is that on the subject of masks, if the person that I'm going to visit or the store I'm going to visit, if they don't care if I wear a mask, I'm not going to wear a mask. But if they want me to wear a mask, I will wear a mask. And I'm not listening to my governor to say, you know best. I'm listening to those who I'm actually visiting and talking to.
does anyone else have any thoughts on a question? Go ahead. You don't have to raise your hand. I mean, yeah.
I've been thinking about this a lot recently, since I've struggled with it. I think with the masks, the biggest thing that bugs me is I feel that the government's overstepping their bounds and they're not living up to the Lord's law. This is like one of the situations where I feel that they're not doing the right thing, and that's some of my reasoning behind my thoughts recently. But reading, I don't remember where it was. It was where Jesus was trying to be, where the lawyers tried to tempt Christ with the coin, and he said, I honor Caesar and I also honor God. And that just kind of hit me really hard this time around, because I realized that I'm not honoring Caesar per se as much as I should be. I'm honoring my feelings. I'm not doing what the government asks, and because even though I feel they're outside unrighteous dominion, there's not. I've just struggled with it recently, and that it just hit me hard, and I've tried to do a little better with that recently.
Okay, time's up, so I'm just going to go ahead and interrupt, but this is awesome, and I hope we get to this again. I think we need to get to this. Of course, this is an ethical dilemma. Ethical dilemmas never, ever, ever tell you exactly what to think. You get to continue having your own opinion, but it's ethical discussions are those where we can all bring in all of our knowledge and our opinions, and then we get to ultimately make the decision for ourselves. But hopefully it's opening our minds to something we've never seen before. Like Carter, you had never seen that before. I hadn't either, and I've been struggling with this so much, as the prophet tells us to obey the government, to be like Christ was being. And I have tried, I've actually thought, what? I've really, really struggled with this, but I feel like I'm opening my mind to things that are still important to me, but I'm tweaking it a little. And I'm hoping that the Lord and the Spirit can guide us. And we'll continue going with this same thing, because I think there's some others that are talking about this as well. Thank you, Elijah. Looks like number 4 is Enoch. We get to talk about it again. So go ahead.
So my question that I put here was, why did Richard Loyal Anderson say that Paul said that God ordained power to the Romans? Because he completely missed the Joseph Smith translation, which says that let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power in the church but of God. The powers that are ordained of God. And so God ordained power to his church. And he was saying basically that God ordained the Romans to be the rulers. But in my opinion, which is isn't always sound, but is that he wasn't saying that the Romans were ordained by God, that because of the wickedness they chose the bondage that they were in. Do you have any more thoughts to add to that? Or any other thoughts besides mine?
Can you rephrase that question?
So I just was wondering what you think of that. Do you think that you go along with Richard, or do you think that he may have messed up because missed something that was very important? Anyway, I don't know.
So can I say something? So you're focusing mainly on what Richard Lloyd Anderson said about that scripture, but he then has several other scriptures that have the point that Christ really showed. Maybe
That
maybe
he
we
showed that he followed him, but not that he ordained power to them. And he was saying that Paul said that he ordained power to him, and it really bugged me.
yeah, I can see that.
I think it's important to understand what you mean by ordained power to, like, God said the Romans were like a chosen people, or like, I don't know. It just depends on what your definition of ordained power
Does
is.
does anybody have their scriptures with them? Why don't you take us to that scripture, Enoch? Sorry, I'm interrupting and I'm talking. I shouldn't do that, but. Do you want to take us there, Enoch? So is it Romans 13:1? And by the way, none of us have to get to the answer today. Like Elijah was saying, I don't really know the answer. And like Carter was saying, he's kind of been, his boat's been rocked, right, Carter? And we're not trying to get to the exact answer today, but we are trying to open our minds to something that Christ is showing us and our prophet today. So we just got to find out what that is. So it says, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. So if you look under all, okay, if you look under all of, oh, you can't even see this unless so if I'm looking at all these blue words, I go to be subject and I go to the footnote and it says, Greek, be submissive, render obedience. And then it says Doctrine and Covenants 58, 22, 21 to 22, which Gracie, you wrote that in your assignment. What did you say? What does it say there? Do you have access to your assignment?
Yeah, it's the verse says, let no man break the laws of the land, for he that keepeth the laws of God hath no need to break the laws of the land. Wherefore be subject to the powers that be until he reigns, whose right it is to reign, and subdues all enemies under his feet.
Okay, so it says that, and then it also directs us to the topical guide on citizenship and the topical guide on governments. So he's saying, let every soul be subject to that. So that's probably where he got this idea to be subject. And then it says, let every soul be subject unto higher powers. And then you go unto the footnote for powers there. And it just says Greek word for authorities, which is true. Polity is similar to power in Greek. Then you go for there is no power, and this is where you get, let's see, is it? Okay, that just gives us to John 19, 10 through 12, which talks about, let's see. Then saith Pilate unto him, speaketh thou not, knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee? This is just talking about the power that governments take upon themselves. But then here is where, but of God is the Joseph Smith translation. In the church, but of God. And that's what he wrote here. For there is no power in the church, but of God. But then you go to the powers, the last powers and the footnote, and it is governments. So that one, all of it talks about governments, but then it says there is no power in the church, but of God. So in the church, there's power of God, but it's also, he's saying, be subject unto the higher powers, unto those governments, be subject unto them. And then we go ahead.
And I was just saying, I do agree that God does use governments to support and maintain his cause and be up to work. I just didn't like that he was saying he ordained the Romans to be in charge, where it was never ordained. It was more of given. I don't know.
Yeah, ordained kind of sounds like priesthood ordination, doesn't it? Yeah. Foreordained are the things that we are told to do or that we are called to do on earth, right? So maybe, and I don't know the answer, but maybe he's saying these were leaders that God put in place here because he knew that this was going to help the expanse of Christianity. He knew their dispositions. He knew, okay, I'm going to put them there. I know they're going to do some really awful things, but they're also going to conquer and they're going to expand the world so that I can get Christianity in all these places. So in that way, they're foreordained, if that makes sense. I can hear you, Hannah. I can hear myself through you, so I'm going to close my door. Okay. So, I think you're onto something, Enoch, but I think there's also a way to look at it as God knew who he was sending to earth. He knew he was sending Marcus Aurelius. He knew he was sending Alexander the Great, which we got to talk about a little bit last year in the Greek time, right? Where he knew these people and what they were going to do. He knew that they were corrupt, they were imperfect, they were going to mess things up, they were going to hurt his people, but he also knew they were going to be there. And so they're pretty much foreordained to come this time to help out with this expansion, right? Elijah.
I think the word I might use instead of the word ordained, because that has a lot of other connotations, I think the word I would use is more like allow. I think God allows leaders to make bad decisions because that's how agency works. I don't know if he necessarily preordains them as like, Nero, my faithful servant, go murder all these people when you come to earth.
I didn't say that. I did not say that.
I'm not trying to straw man.
He knew their disposition. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he knows dispositions. I think he knows what's going to happen. So, even if something's evil, he'll kind of allow it to exist because agency is more important than goodness, I guess. because that's the whole point. That's kind of what we were talking about last semester with the whole does God make evil or allow evil kind of debate. But I think this is kind of lining up with what your question or your concern was, Enoch, in that like maybe it might just be a translation issue with ordained. That might be the issue with how it got turned into the word ordained, because I know words are very different. But I think that God allows all governments to work. Obviously, there are very bad governments. There's very bad societies, but he allows them to have power over people because, I mean, it's part of the grand experiment. It's part of just seeing, throwing a bunch of people on the earth and, seeing what happens, I guess. And so, yeah, I think allow would be the word I would use over ordain if you want to give it a clearer definition, I guess.
Oh, I can't show that in my funnies, but it looks like he doesn't even use the word ordained. He says, even though Christ was unlawfully crucified with the approval of an appointee of Tiberius, Christian leaders stressed civil obedience as a gospel duty. Paul stating that higher powers were assigned by God. So the word
Even assigned, I don't really like, because he didn't assign the Romans to be in charge to kill people. He allowed it to. I really like the word allow, because he didn't.
He did allow them to be there, but he knew their disposition. And so he gave that assignment, you're going to go here because I know what you're going to do. And I need the Christianity to get all over the world. And at that time, all over the world was just that Mediterranean area, right? So yeah, whether we like the word or not, we do know that God knows us each individually. We do know that. We do know that all of us were foreordained or assigned to go places where he knew we would do the best work. And it's the parable of the talents. Some of us are going to do great work and we're going to expand our talents. We're going to learn to articulate. We're going to learn history. We're going to figure out the principles that make or break civilizations. And he's going to use whatever our disposition is in the key places. And we don't have a choice of where we come. We just don't have. That's a choice we don't have. Did any of you choose to come here? We know by prophets' words that we do not choose our families. President Spencer W. Kimball was the one that says, we do not choose our families. He assigns us to places. So we don't choose them. And if we did choose our families, that would mean there was only one person for us to get married to. And that's not the truth. So when it comes to agency, we have no choice in where we come. He assigns us to these places. That's a given. And so I can see why he would use the word assigned, but yeah, we're hung up on that word, but really we do know that we all know that God knows who we are. And whether we expand our talents and give those 10-fold talents to him, or we hide our talent in the ground, he just knows where will be the best for us and our disposition. Does that help? I don't know, because God did not think that little place was the whole world, especially in world. Oh, I see. I'm not okay. Assigned or ordained sounds like it's fated, which is against agency. Yeah, that is against agency. However, did you choose to come where you are, Elijah? You did?
I mean, it depends on your frame of reference.
I guess your family chose to live in Texas, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, did you get to choose to come to this country when you were born? No, we're assigned and we're foreordained to come to places. But after that, once we're here, and before too, we had all this agency we could choose. But he does assign. He does assign all of us and all of the leaders, and he just knows there's going to be some that are going to do great and some that are going to really be corrupt and really hurt people. He just knows that. But all of us need to just kind of figure that out. And maybe I'm completely wrong. Who knows? Don't believe me. Yeah, expand on that, Enoch. What are you trying to say with that?
You said that it was only he needed to spread his religion only to the whole world, which was only that little section. But Christ came to the Americas, and we know he came to other places. In Russia, there's a story that Christ came and blessed the land on the south or whatever, and cursed the land or whatever, and something. So we know that he's come to many places, and so he didn't just feel like that was the whole world. And yes, he did need it to expand. I was just Elijah asked questions about the 200 years of peace, and so I tried to explain more.
Oh, okay, yeah. So for the rest of the world, they didn't know that the Americas were there. And we're going to read an amazing article called The Voyage of Brendan, where we think this man does discover the new world, but he comes back and he says it's a special area and it's safe for God. I'm not going to go there. So really, according to civilization at that time, the Americans didn't exist as part of the world. We do know that now, you know.
To them, it didn't exist. I was just saying, expounding that there are other places that God knew of that the world didn't know of.
Yes, perfect. Yes, I didn't see all of that. I'm so sorry. Okay, that makes sense. We're going to continue beating this out because I think ethical dilemmas are pretty amazing and fun. We're never going to get to the right decision, and we shouldn't. Each of us have the opportunity to have our own opinion with this. But I do ask that we all open our minds. Okay, let's go to the next one. Jacoby.
Okay, I'm not sure how to say this guy's name. So Julie, can you help me out with that?
Yes, but change that to Ignat. I don't know, but because I speak Spanish, I kind of fall to the Latin's way to say it, which would be Ignatius.
No.
Ignatius.
What does Ignatius mean when he says not all wounds are healed by the same plaster?
Ooh, I had that same question too.
And I was thinking, I read this morning and I was like, totally hit me like, oh my gosh, like, I thought of like an interdisciplinary thought. Like, we don't use the same Band-Aid for every wound. Like, that would be disgusting. So what are your guys' thoughts on that quote? Enoch?
I think it's like every situation has sometimes a different answer. When Alma's people left Limhi and got captured, they didn't rebel and fight against them. He led them away. But when the Lamanites came to the Nephite cities, they were commanded to fight. And so it's not always that they just run away. It's that sometimes there's fighting, sometimes there's peaceful ways and for the time and situation.
Yeah, it's like different answers for different questions, basically. Does anyone else have any thoughts?
Just to reply to Enoch, I know this is not like the main part of the conversation, but just to play devil's advocate, I think that it is important though to have some kind of structure to base your answers off of. Like if you have this perspective that, oh, everything has a different answer, then you kind of fall into this kind of neo-postmodern relativism where you can kind of justify any action by saying, well, it's a different question, it's a different circumstance, hence it has a different answer. And so that's why we have the commandments, that's why we have, laws, that's why we have this structure to base this application off of, so that we're not completely answering everything differently.
I agree with that. Thanks for clarifying.
Carter?
this is along the lines of what Enoch was saying in response to what Elijah said. I think that there are situations where there are different answers to every question, because like even Corey ten Boom based her decision to lie. She based her decision to lie off of the situation. If it was not in a life-threatening situation, she probably wouldn't have lied. She probably would have told the truth. And but because of the situation, her answer changed. So I think that every situation does beg a different answer.
I'd like to add to that. This week we're studying the first vision, right? And we know that there's several different versions of the first vision. And what's so fascinating is that the version that we're studying in the Doctrine and Covenants, well, Pearl of Great Price, is the version that specifically focuses on the restoration of the gospel, okay? Whereas much of this experience for Joseph Smith was about repenting and about inquiry, but the inquiry probably goes along with the restoration, but there was so much in there about repentance. And the one that we're studying this week in Come Follow Me is not that one. It's about how the church was established. And so there's going to be different accounts given to different people, and people take it differently, that where some principle really stuck out to them and they really ran with that, and they wrote that down to focus on that one principle. So really the story was there, but it's told differently for different situations. Does that make sense? Yeah, and it's so interesting. Kendall's living with us and she dates, and she'll come home and she'll tell Dave and I her story. And then I'll hear her telling it to Edie, who's on a mission. And, when Edie calls on Mondays, Kendall gets in and talks, and she'll tell her. And it's so different because it's focusing on more of the attributes, more of the physical appearance, more of it's just so.
And then when she tells Dallin, she just says, "Yep, it was okay."
Yeah, it's so awesome. And so that's what gives us to reason that there are different ways of saying it. So it's an application, and there's billions of ways to apply something, but really the principle, like Elijah was saying, the principle stays the same. And that's where, and when we stay close to those principles and we're standardized on those, then great. But then the application is different. Oh my gosh, Julie Greenman, be quiet. I'm muting myself. Except that let's go to Gracie. Unless, Jacoby, do you have something else you want to say? Okay, Gracie.
Okay, my question was, what ways can we become more accepting of others even when we don't share the same beliefs or backgrounds? That was kind of similar to the other questions about how do we obey the government when we have our own opinions. Because, yeah. So, anybody have any thoughts?
I think there is value in associating with those of your same beliefs. They can help strengthen you and reaffirm your beliefs. But also there is value in diversity and learning from others' perspectives. So you need to find that balance of having a good anchor of friends that you can fall back on to reassure yourself, and also a group of people that you can learn new things from and hear about different perspectives.
Thank you.
I think we also need to remember that every person is still a person. Just because they believe different doesn't mean they're not a person. And so if you disagree with them, just know they're still children of God.
I think that we need to treat everyone with respect, even if they believe differently than us.
How many of you know that my husband and I have completely different political views? Yeah, I speak about it a lot, huh? But we still love each other. So, Hannah, what have you noticed? Looking at Gracie's question there on the class notes, how has Dad and I become accepting of each other when we really don't share the same beliefs or have the same background? She has to laugh first and get it all out. She's probably laughing because we woke her up last night debating.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I'm in my room and I'm finally going to bed early for the first time in a long time, so I can get up at 5, which I did. But all of a sudden, I hear the door like close from them coming in from a movie, and it is so loud, and they just will not stop talking, and they just keep debating. And then I called them and asked them to shush for a minute so I could fall back asleep. And then they said okay, and then it went back to being a little bit loud. But then they just came upstairs, and it was really hard. But yeah, that was interesting.
But how do you feel like we've become accepting of each other, even though we don't believe the same thing? You notice anything?
Well, you're married and you're not divorced, so that's a good thing.
But
I mean, so far, so good.
there's so much more to that, because some people live with each other and they don't feel accepting of each other.
Oh, definitely agreed. I feel like you guys can accept the facts that each of us have. Sorry, one sec.
So we
Someone
can
just
say,
texted me.
hey,
My bad. I think it's interesting because you are both able to accept the fact that you each have different opinions, and you're welcome to debate about it, but that you don't let that come in between the two of you.
cool. I think that's the key, Gracie. Does anybody else have any thoughts about that?
I mean, everyone's been saying this already, but I think it's just important to reaffirm this. I think we share so much more in common with people. I mean, if you look at like the human species, we share almost 100% like DNA with each other. And if you look at the vastness of human experience, like this generation or the people living on the earth today are so more similar than people living way, way since the beginning of time. So like we share so much in common, and we can decide to focus on that, or we could decide to focus on what sets us apart. And they both have their time and place, like people were saying. It's important to be uncomfortable. It's important to navigate through different ideas, and diversity allows you to do that. But like Hannah hinted at, if you have this core value or this core feeling of value in people, and this feeling of just being connected to everyone, then you'll be able to disagree with them, you'll be able to argue with them, you'll be able to explore this diversity, but you'll also be able to share this common respect, because you are so much more similar and you are so much more connected to them than you probably think.
That's awesome. Let's go with Carter and then Dallin and Emily, not Emily. It's my oldest daughter's name. Hannah, if you want to come up with a question from your reading as well and add it after Dallin's, that'd be great. Go for it.
My question was pretty similar to a lot of the ones we discussed already. It was, I already forgot it. Can I still honor a leader and disagree with their legislation and laws? That's one of the big things that I've been struggling with recently, because I feel like there have been some things in the government that have happened that I don't agree with. And I've struggled to come to terms with that. And I was just wondering if you guys think there's a way to still honor the leaders and still not agree with their legislation. I can't see your hands, so if you have your hand up, go ahead and talk.
I think just to start the conversation in a little bit of a different place, I don't know if we have to honor leaders, and that I don't know if just by virtue of someone's position they deserve respect. I mean, especially with morally corrupt leaders, I don't think that they do deserve this honor from us. I don't think we have to artificially create this arbitrary line between who we honor and respect based on how much power they have over people. I think if we pay attention more to their core values and we can see that reflect in their legislation, I think then we can base that off of who we want to honor. Something really interesting about the American government system is that we get to kind of choose our leaders. And part of that is understanding that we don't have to honor everyone just because they are powerful. It's a little bit different in a monarchy. So that's what's kind of cool about America. And so if we can look at leaders as people, and we can look at people as capable of both tremendous good and inconceivable evil, I mean, we can understand that there's a spectrum where people can deserve honor or not deserve honor.
To go along with that, I don't think we should respect them, honor them because of their place, their status, but that we respect them as an individual or whatever. Like because every individual has worth, doesn't mean you have to agree with them. America, after trying and trying to do it lawfully, rebelled against King George III because he was not living up to his job.
I hate to use this example, but I don't think that we should respect, say, Hitler. I'm sorry to bring his name to the conversation because he's so overused, but I think everyone can understand that, yeah, we don't have to respect Hitler as an individual. I mean, maybe a part of him deserves some shred of respect, but I don't think, again, I'm sorry to use Hitler as an example, but I don't think that we should hate his legislation, but still love the soul that he has. I don't know.
I think my struggle with it is I recognize, like in Utah, Governor Herbert is a real person, and I actually know some of his family, and their family are great, but I just can't. I've struggled honoring them and him as a good person outside of legislation, and honor the legislation that he's passed that really don't feel constitutional to me, and that's my struggle. I mean, I get that you can't. It's like hard to respect or honor somebody, especially Adolf Hitler, who I don't think it's possible to respect him, at least from a moral standpoint. And that's just my struggle. Is I can't figure out how to honor the person outside of legislation. It's like I talked about this yesterday in Young Men's. It's hating the sin but not hating the sinner. If somebody has struggles with marijuana, you don't hate them because they struggle with marijuana. You love them just as much. You just don't like the sin that they're committing. And I guess I'm just trying to figure out how to do that in the government.
I think I totally agree with that, but I don't know if that quite lines up with the same way that leaders work. Because, in hating the sin, not the sinner, they have full autonomy over themselves and they are controlling just themselves. When leaders are controlling themselves as well as passing legislation that, can constrict or allow certain behavior for you, that it's I don't think the metaphor quite matches up, because they are making decisions that affect you, and you have control over yourself. And so yes, you should honor most rules that you agree with, but I don't think that it's completely binary, as in someone has power over you and tells you what to do, and you give up all of your agency, especially in America where, I mean, protest is kind of built into the system. We have, terms of leaders so that there can be like a lawful protest against leaders we do not like.
Did anyone look up? I think it's really wise to define respect, because there's several definitions of respect, and maybe some people are looking at one of those definitions and the other is looking at the other. Let's see. Hold on here. I was going to share a screen, but it doesn't look like it's going to. Is this working? Can you see this?
Yeah.
You can? It said on my thing it wasn't going to show up, and it doesn't show the little. So you can see this that says respect here.
It says
No.
waiting for encyclopedia.
Yeah, it's been open. I just don't know why. Oh, brother. Here's this. Let's try that one. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. So definition of respect. Who wants to read this first one? Number one. Can someone read that? Just
Yeah, I
okay.
can read it.
Okay.
Number one, a relation or reference to a particular thing or situation.
Okay. That might not go with, does that really go with what we're talking about? Probably not. Who would like to read number two?
I can do that. An act of giving particular action, consideration.
Attention. So to
Okay.
me, that's probably the one that I would have looked at. I'm giving Hitler some attention. Okay, I'm considering him. That's also a definition of respect. But look at what some people might look at what respect is. Who would like to read this A, B, and C of three? Anybody?
I can.
Okay, go ahead.
High or special regard, esteem, the quality or state of being esteemed, respects, plural, expression of high or special regard or deference, paid or respects.
So some people might be thinking we're paying deference to Nero, but really we may be respecting them in the sense that we're giving them particular attention, like Christ did in Matthew 22:17-21, where he said, let's render the things that are Caesar's to Caesar and render the things that are God's to God. He's doing this number two, if that makes sense. So when you say respect, I would always try to define the word and then decide where you want to go with that one. We can definitely say we don't respect him, Nero, in the number three. Or if you want to go to Hitler, we don't respect him in the, we don't highly regard him or esteem him. Right? Okay, let's go to, who's the next one? I got to get back to that. I think there was one more. Dallin. Good question. Go for it.
This isn't really like the other questions, but I had wanted to know if anyone had heard about it or knew what it was, what the Jewish revolt was. I'd seen it while I was reading and I was curious.
And just to open your mind, it has everything to do with what we're talking about. Because the Jewish people did not follow the advice of Christ. They constantly resisted the government. And they were ousted out. Jewish cities were destroyed, and they rebelled against them from 66 to 70 is actually. But in 80, 70 is when they were completely dispersed. They went all over into Syria. They were completely, this was when the 10 lost tribes happened. So this is super important to church history, but it's also important to note that they resisted the government. So it has everything to do with it. And so by resisting, the government was more powerful and did bad things to them. Why do you suppose our church today is taking the long view with what the government's doing? Why do you think, Dallin, I think your question is absolutely the best segue into this next thing I'm going to go into. Enoch, why is the church taking the long view?
I think part of it is whether or not it's a good law or whatever, it helps the work of God go forth. And so with the, where was I going? So that they even have they've been trying to be careful so that they are never viewed as a bad person so that others can be saved. Like the temple in China, which I never expected, is coming to pass because they have been trying to be friends and not enemies with everyone.
Yep, no resistance, following all the laws, everything. And as soon as the missionaries in Russia broke laws, guess what happened to the missionaries? Totally gone. Now they can't even preach the gospel to anybody because they resisted. The missionaries did not follow the laws of the land. It's so interesting. So we look at our founding, and we had a moral people who were founded on religion and God and loving each other and work and honesty. And I'm sure there was scoundrels here and there, and there was, corrupt leaders at some point. You know that. You know the corrupt leaders that lived in Salem, Massachusetts in 1692 that caused so many innocent people to be killed. But for the most part, the foundation of everybody's life was based on God and his laws. And it was super easy for the new world to come up with the laws and the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence because we had a moral people, right? And it was just moral enough for the restoration of the gospel to come in. Now we don't have a moral people. We don't have a good government. We've got some good things happening, but it's not a moral government. So we are now back to where this revolt happened. We're getting to that point where we've got some poor government now, corruption, and we've got corruption in the people. We've got corruption everywhere. So now what the prophet is trying to do is he's trying to remind us of this old Rome. He's trying to get us to be like Christ. If you look at, I've got some things in the class notes. Maybe I'll just show my, why does this happen? It's like I try to share my screen and it doesn't show up, except it shows us it's just coming to it. It's probably not showing anything. So everybody just go to your class notes, make sure you look at this. Underneath number 16, it says, look at all the ways that Christ asks us to submit to government and look at the way he submits to authority. He allows his friend to betray him. Who betrayed him?
Judas, one of his disciples.
Yeah, Judas Iscariot. He had two Judas. So one of them was Judas Iscariot. Yeah, he allows himself to be taken by the Sanhedrin. He submits himself to an illegal trial before the Sanhedrin at night. Everything was illegal about what they were doing. He heals the ear of one of his opponents and meekly goes before Pilate and Herod. And I'm not talking about Herod the Great, but the other Herod, which was one of his sons or grandsons, I think. And the reality is that all of this is done because he is submitting to the will of the Father. And the Father has asked him to submit to the governments. The government wasn't good, it was corrupt. Only when a government is good and there are moral people can we really have some good revolts that do things. But as soon as the people become corrupt and we don't have a lot of morals, we get to go back to submitting to the will of the Father. And I think I want to ask you these questions, and I want you to think about them. Why would Christ submit to these unjust governments? Why would you submit to a government? And that the church is taking a long view in the political commotion. Why do you think? We talked about that. How does the church's submission to the Chinese government, you talked about this, Enoch, increase the government's trust in them and allow for more people to receive the ordinances of the gospel in the future? Case in point, Chinese temple being built, but only Chinese allowed to go into the temple. That's okay, we'll obey it. Right now, we live in a very corrupt world, and it's going to get more corrupt, as we know from the prophecies. So we get to find out for ourselves whether we're going to follow Christ and the prophet, or whether we're going to resist and fight and cause factions and debates. And we can debate. My husband and I still debate all the time about it because I have a hard time wearing a mask. Well, guess what happens to glasses when you wear a mask? We got to figure it out for ourselves how we're going to see this. But it is absolutely essential that we understand the Roman government if we're going to understand how to be in our government today. I can't believe how perfect timing it is that we are studying the Roman government. It's pretty perfect to me, this time period. So much went on in the chat. So anybody want to say something while I'm catching up on the chat?
I think it's important to realize that Christ did need to submit at that time, but Joseph Smith went to a few of the unfair trials in Missouri, but many times was commanded to leave and flee. So it's not always that we must submit. It is according to the will of God at that time and place.
Right, because there was a more righteous and just country back then. Yes, I agree with that. You're right. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier with who was it? We were talking about different answers for different. Oh, it was Jacoby's. Where is Jacoby? Oh, there it is. Not all wounds are healed by the same plaster. So it just depends on the climate of the political climate, the climate of the mores of the people. That depends on how we deal with things. You're right. These are some great things you've written in here. Yeah, a lot of it had to do with what we were talking about. So now we have a morally corrupted state. Should we still follow the 12th article of faith? Interesting question. Yeah, you have to decide. And this part of humanities is just finding out how to be and how to become. So that's a great question. You get to go to the Lord today, I hope. I invite you tonight as you kneel down, or even right after class, kneel down, ask him, help me understand this. Help me really, really understand this. And he'll lead you. I've been praying since the summer, and I feel like I'm getting more of an answer for myself. I don't know if it's right yet. I'm just getting little bits and pieces. Will you do that? Will all of you pray today and ask yourself that question that Elijah wrote down? in the chat box? By raising hands, will you do that? Some of you. I really highly encourage you to do that. Keep the Lord as your companion. The Holy Ghost will teach you all things. And what does the prophet say a couple years ago about the Holy Ghost? Does anybody know that quote?
Isn't it like the constant guiding, directing influence of the Holy Ghost?
Yeah, but what's
I know it, but I don't know it enough to.
So we cannot survive spiritually without the comforting, guiding, directing influence of the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
Or is it a different one?
Survive spiritually. Koalani, aren't you the spiritual, what is it? What does it mean? Spiritual warrior. If we're going to survive spiritually, we've got to be Koalanis. Although none of us have that name because it wasn't given to us in a special way, but it's interesting that we started out class with Elijah's experience. In order to survive spiritually, we got to seek the Spirit. And how do we do that? Many different ways. Even we can have the Spirit when we're studying about ancient Rome. I loved everything that you all said. I don't condemn anything anybody said. I think you're all on a journey to find out what is truth. And I invite you to continue on that path. All right. Okay. Anybody who struggles with the 5 types of questions, do any of you want to have a special session with me at all? I know some of you are really trying to figure it out. Please text me. I can meet with you, or we can meet right after class if you want to. So let me know. I'm noticing that we've got to really figure that out, because the 5 types of questions are how you're going to become who you are. So we really need to look at those. All right. Have a great, let's look at the syllabus. So next week, still not any awesome literature yet, but we're going to read James E. Talmage, a scholar of the church. We're going to read chapters 5 and 6. They're in your reading packet. It's about the great apostasy, but some of you are going to be really amazed at what you find out about some of the emperors. And keep your mind open. Learn from them. Find out what caused the great apostasy. What exactly caused it? And maybe there's no exact, but there's a lot of different reasons. So look for that as you're reading. And I highly suggest you read some every single day. To wait to the last minute, you will probably not feel like a successful person. If you do some every single day, you will. Okay, any questions?
For the James Talmage assignment, on Google Classroom, it says that's due on Friday. Is it due Friday or Wednesday?
Oh, that's funny. Let's go. Oh, I think there's 2 of them on that one. That was like the only time. Thank you for asking. Oh my gosh. Here, let me get back to that. Classwork. Okay, so external and internal causes. Yes, so this is going to be having you read pretty much all of it, but you're going to choose 3 Roman leaders, and you're going to, and 5 causes of internal persecution. So you will have 2 assignments for this one, and it's because there's so much material. Not a ton of reading, but there's a lot of material. I highly suggest that you don't go so deep that it's going to take up all your time, but you read it, you're going to choose 3 Roman leaders rather than reading about all of them. So there'll be some skimming around. I don't expect you to read every single word. I expect you to look for 3 Roman leaders and write how they perpetuated Christian persecution. And tell 1 or more things that surprised you about the pagan persecution, because some of you might have really, really liked certain emperors, and you'll find some things out that maybe make you think differently. Okay. And then, yeah, so that one's due on Friday by 10 p.m. So I've given you till the nighttime. And then the next one is also that same apostasy, Talmage's great apostasy, but you're going to note the changes done in the 1st century, 2nd century, and 3rd century on baptism, and the changes done on the sacrament during the 1st century, 2nd century, and 3rd century. The reason why I want you to do that is because we participate in baptism and sacrament, and it would be really good to know what those foundations are. So, and that one is due Wednesday by 9. So thank you, Gracie. I would have felt bad had we not talked about that. I appreciate you all looking ahead. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much. Great class.
Thank you.
See you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Sorry for getting here late. I'll go watch the recording now.
Hey.